Hi everyone, this is Debbie from Project 39 Mini Album. I am going to show you in this video the tutorial on how I made this mini album, and I used Simple Stories Trail Mix collection. I'll tell you about the supplies you'll need, and the link is in the description box for where you can get all of the material. I did get them from Country Craft Creations. This is a design team project. There is a video to do the complete walkthrough, but I'll do an overview from the aspect of a tutorial so you know what you're making. So the mini album measures 9 by 5 with a 2¼ inch spine. It has 5 signatures and they're top loading pocket pages. And on each of the signature, well, on most of them, I added some extra pages. So that's how you can get a lot of bang for your buck. I used 12 by 12 Artisan cardstock. You can choose whatever color you want. I think this would be fun to do in a craft color. Black, of course, would always work. To me, black is a neutral when you're making mini albums. So you could try using that. I tried not to use anything from my stash. I used jute twine that came from Country Craft Creations. I used enamel dots that came from my stash, but there are some available with the collection. Yeah, I mean, really, I did use some small scraps of white Artisan cardstock, and I used a die to cut the photo mats, but besides that, everything is from the collection. When I make tutorials, I try to do everything from the collection so I can say, okay, go buy this, and then you have everything you need. That's not to say you can't supplement it from things from your stash. All right, that is pretty much the basics. Let's get started with the tutorial. And real quick, we're going to talk about the supplies you'll need to make the mini album. Scissors, pencil, ruler, bone folder, and stylus for scoring. I used the designer dry clear glue from the Art Glitter Company. I used magnets, the small magnetic discs from Basic Gray. I think I used some jute twine as well. The items that I purchased from Country Craft Creations were the 12 by 12 paper collection of Simple Stories Trail Mix. This is the 6 by 8, which I'll do another project with soon. So make sure you subscribe so you see what that is. But I used the 12 by 12 collection. I also used the ephemera die cut bits and pieces, the journal bits and pieces, the page pieces, and a couple of the frames. You also need some of the chipboard, not the lightweight, the medium or heavyweight chipboard, and Artisan cardstock. I believe I used the natural. I don't remember because I didn't have it labeled. I had 15 pieces to start. I had a couple left over, so you should be able to do it with 15 pieces. I used some enamel dots from my stash. You probably, if you still can get them, go to Country Craft Creations and order the enamel dots that go with the collection, and you'll be golden. All right, let's get started. We're going to make the cover first. To make the cover, I am using 2 pieces of cardstock that are 8 inches by 12. I am using the Artisan cardstock in the white color. I'm going to add a piece of score tape, just 1/4 inch score tape, and I am using the measurements on my surface to help line things up. So I'm just going to overlap these by 1/4 inch just to cover the score tape, lining that up at the bottom. And now I've got one piece that is 16 inches wide. Now I've already covered my my chipboard pieces This one is 2¼ by 9. I'm going to remove the backing and center this as best I can on my paper. It is not the end of the world if you don't center it perfectly, because this is just the cover. You're going to hide any mistakes. If it's not straight, it's not going to show. Don't sweat the small stuff. So I put a piece of score tape, 1/4-inch score tape, on both sides of the chipboard. Going to burnish that down real good because this is the only chance we're going to have to burnish. And then I'll peel off the backing. Now I'm going to place my other pieces, which are 9 by 5. I have 2 other chipboard pieces that are 9 by 5. I'll remove the backing paper because I did cover all of the chipboard with score tape. And I'm going to place this overlapping that 1/4-inch score tape just a little. I'm going to have about 3/16 inch gap. So a little more than 1/8, a little less than 1/4. And I will push this down. I'll do the same with the other piece. And I will place it on the other side of the chipboard spine, again with that same 3/16-ish gap. I'm going to burnish. And then I'm going to take a pair of scissors and I'm just going to cut off the corners, but I'll be careful not to get any closer than 1/8 of an inch from the chipboard pieces. It's not a completely straight cut. I go towards the corner and then once I get to the corner, veer away. And what do you do if you come too close? You just take one of these corners and glue it on, and nobody will ever know. Now, you could add a piece of score tape to the outside or the outside of the chipboard, or both, if you want to. Sometimes I do, but I personally feel like that is pretty much overkill. Because once you glue this down, it's not going to go anywhere. And you're really just wasting your tape. And especially once you glue it down, you're going to cover it. So how's it going to move? So anyhow, I do put a piece of glue right next to the chipboard and then zigzag it through the rest of the gap. If you don't want this much paper, you can cut that down. But it is fine. And then once I get close to where I want to be, I burnish, and I sort of start at the center and I go towards the center. And the reason is, if for some reason there's any bubbling, there's a little bit here but not much, you can place it right in the divot between the cover and the spine. Alright, so again, I place a bead of glue right next to the chipboard. I like to make sure I get the edge there and the edge there, and then just zigzag glue. I don't need to go overboard with the glue at this point. It's going to stay. And of course I do use the Designer Dries Clear glue from the Art Glitter Institute. I might try others, but I seem to always come back to that. Alright, pretty happy with how that is. Now I'm going to take my bone folder and just push in the little triangular pieces there on the corners. And then I will go ahead and add my glue. and grab my bone folder, push it up so it's at a complete right angle. And I know now that the glue is adhering the paper to the chipboard, just that very little piece, the thickness of the chipboard. And then I burnish. And one more side to go. And there we go. And then I like to take my bone folder and go around the edge to make sure. And then what I also will do is take the blunt end of my bone folder and push down until the paper adheres to that 1/4 inch score tape. And then fold my cover. And there we go with the cover. Next we're going to make the hinge. Now our hinge is going to be 8.5 inches, and I'll use an 8.5 by 12 piece of paper. I'm going to put the long side at the top, and I'll start scoring at 2, 2.5, 3, 3 3/8, 3 7/8, 4 3/8, 4 3/4, 5 1/4, 5 3/4, 6 1/8, 6 5/8, 7 1/8, 7 1/2, 8, 8.5. And what that gives me is see if I can, we'll show you this way. A set of hinges, 2 1/2 inch pieces, and then a gusset. Hinge, hinge, gusset, hinge, hinge, gusset, etc. What I like to do at this point is, with the bumpy side up, I'm going to fold between the 2 1/2 inch pieces, the 2 1/2 inch scores. So score, burnish right in the center. And then when you're doing that, make sure your sides are even. So again, in between each of the 2 1/2 inch pieces, and we'll do that until we're done. So you'll do that 5 times. Then I take the piece, and you sort of have a couple of mountains facing up, and I'm going to hold it down with my forefingers and pull it towards me, holding it down with my thumb actually, and make that mountain become a tall peak. Pull them together, and then with my fingers burnish back and forth. Now it's going to come apart because we don't have glue on it, but we're just training the paper to do it at this point. So just pull it towards you, go back and forth with your fingers, and then I pull them all towards me so the gussets are laying flat on the surface, but the hinges are sticking straight up and they're together. Then I pull them all towards me, holding them down with one hand and burnish with the other. And then still, everything's close together. I'll push them away from me and hold down with one hand and burnish with the other. So we've really trained our paper to go the way we want it to. Now what I'll do is turn it right side or upside down again. We have the gussets facing up and the mountains facing down. And I'll open it just a little bit, enough so I can get some glue in. And I'll just zigzag back and forth. It doesn't need to be sopping wet. And try to go as close to the edge as possible without going over. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Then again, I'll pull it and squeezing the glue, distribute the glue across then I know I've got it distributed and it's holding true. Now I'll do the same with the other gussets, just zigzag. I'll go back, go real close to the edge, turn it over, squeeze, and do the same with the other ones. After you're comfortable with this, you can add glue to more than one hinge, but don't do it until you've gotten your system down. And also don't do it if you have a fan going, if you're in a very dry climate, or if it's very hot out. I happen to be where it's rainy and damp and cold. So none of those things apply to me. And I don't have a fan. All right, I've got that all glued together, and I'm going to again push them all away from me and burnish with the edge of my bone folder. If any glue seeps out, clean it up immediately. I try not to put glue all the way to the edge when I'm adding the glue, so usually I don't have any seeping out. So there we go. Now we've got our hinge system all ready. Now one side's bigger than the other. It doesn't matter. Sometimes I try to balance it out, but it doesn't matter. I'm just going to eyeball it at first and see how much room I need to be quite centered on the paper. I want to be centered top and bottom and centered side to side. So I want the first hinge to be about a 1/4 inch away from the gusset caused by, or the divot caused by where the spine and the cover meet. And then when I have an idea, if you feel more comfortable, you could draw a pencil line so you can match it up. But I know that I can match it up because I can work fairly quickly. Now I'm taking my glue and going down on the space caused by those two papers coming together. I don't always get it perfectly, but I try. I like to make sure there's glue there. And then I'll go back and forth, I'll zigzag on each of the gussets. And then at least a 1/4 inch, I want to make sure that I get it on the rest of the spine. I don't have any glue on the sides because I want to use it to hold on to. So I'll take it, place it. I know where I'm going to place it because I've already dry run it. I've already dry fit it. And then once it's down, I start at the center. There's 2 center gussets, no big deal, pick one. And I'm going to start at the top and go to the middle, start at the bottom, go to the middle. And what that does is distribute the glue and it doesn't seep out. Then you'll move a gusset or a hinge over to one side and do the same for that next piece. And then I'll go over to the right, start at the bottom, or start at the top, go to the middle, do the same thing, then move over. And you sort of have to work fast because the paper is going to absorb the glue. Okay, and then once that's done, I'll go ahead, just burnish right here. Be gentle with the paper because it's easy to rip it. I will just gently pull this up, and I know that I've still got some room to work. It's not quite dry. I'm going to put some glue on the paper, on the top part and the bottom part of the paper, because I want it to go in that little divot. I know it'll stick because we've got that double-sided 1/4 inch adhesive there. And then I'll also add some here. Maybe go down the edge of it. Go down the edge here. Usually I work a little faster, but I'm talking. So now I'll go ahead and gently burnish, and then I'll take my bone folder and gently, very gently. Go back and forth several times. And then I'll bend up this paper so I can make sure this front piece attaches to that double-sided tape that we put down next to the chipboard piece. All right. And then I'll add some more glue here. Don't need a lot because it's gonna stay down. One more time I'll work this, but I'm gonna let it sit flat. And then I'll do the same with this side. So I'll put some here in that little divot, here in that little divot. I'm not gonna cover that area that's already got some double-sided tape because I want the tape to hold it, not the glue. I'll put glue here just because I want this to stick. And there, so now I'll run this back and forth in that channel, pushing a little bit more each time, but not so much that it rips. If it rips, just grab another piece of paper and glue it right there. Glue it right on top after you've gotten it down. And again, bend this so we know that that double-sided adhesive is going to stick. And push that down. All right, now I'm gonna gently burnish and then move my hinge one side. I'll go this way. Move it this side. And do that a couple of times. It's moving back and forth nicely, so I feel like it's got good adhesion and it's good. Now I'm not going to open it because it'll cause some bubbling up right there. I'm going to just let it dry flat in the meantime, and then I will make the base pages. So I'm going to go ahead and make the base pages, and then our cover will be done. Okay, now I'm going to show you how we make the base pages. I'm taking a 12 by 12. You could use 8.5 by 11, but I'm taking a 12 by 12 because we're going to save the scraps for other parts. And I'll just put it in my scoreboard and simply cut off 3 inches. So it'll be a 9 by 12 at this point. And so save that piece and then cut off another 3 inches. So it'll be 9 by 9. So cut at the 9-inch mark. Now save those. This one will be a insert for the top of our pockets. And then the longer piece will be used for pockets in other places in the book. So save both those pieces. We use all of our scraps. All right, so with my 9 by 9-inch piece, I'm going to put it in my scoreboard. And first I will score at 4.5. And then I'll rotate it once, and then I'll score at 8.5. You could switch it and score at 1/2 inch, but it's just easier on my scoreboard. And now we're going to cut down some of this, and I'm going to cut it at an angle. In fact, I'll draw it with my pencil, just at an angle from one score line on the other side of that center score line. And then we'll go across and cut across the other score line. So go up to the score line at an angle. And I use my scissors for this, but you are quite welcome to use a paper trimmer if that is easier for you. And then I'll go ahead and trim and miter the other corner. Now I'm going to fold in at that bottom tab and burnish, and then fold over the other half. And I'll burnish there. Add glue to the bottom tab. And that will make our base page. It'll have 2 openings, the top and the left-hand side. but that's all we need to put in the book. So I've already got the first page on. I'm going to dry fit it first to see where it'll fit on the page. If there's any room at the top, then you can cut that off. And I'm going to do it. There's really no room, but I'll just show you how to do it. Just going from the top of the hinge, go towards the center of the book, but just cut off about halfway. Don't go all the way down to the hinge. I mean, I guess you could, but I'm just going to cut off a little bit. I'll go ahead and add glue to both sides of the hinges, both sides of the one hinge. See, there's glue. It's just that the top portion of the hinge, I don't go all the way down to the spine. You don't need it because your paper is not going to go all the way down. I generally try to put the paper no more than a third of the way onto the hinge. So right now I've got 1/8 of an inch of the hinge showing. That bottom piece is lined up with the bottom of the book. It's parallel to the bottom of the book. So my page is in straight. And then I'll burnish this pretty well. And then I'll add the other pages, and then we've got our base pages in the book. Okay, now I'm going to grab 2 sheets of my 12 by 12 paper, and I'm first going to cut it down to 8.5. And then I am going to cut it 5. And another 5. Don't forget, save those scraps. We're going to use those. And with these 4 pieces that are now 5 by 8.5, we're going to score them with the short side at the top. So the 5-inch side at the top, you'll score at 4.5. Or you could flip and score at half, but this is easier for me. So score at 4.5. Yo. I'm going to miter on those score lines. So just go from the score line up just at a slight angle. And then we're going to fold and burnish on those score lines. And then I'm going to skip the first page, go to the second page, and we're going to add it to the front of the pages. But as I said, skip that first page. We're going to do something different. So I'll add glue to my tab and line it up to the edge of the page. We're not going to line it up with the hinge. We're lining it up with the page. Make sure your sides are lined up as well. So we'll just put all these 4 pieces down in the same fashion. Again, line it up with the page, not the hinge. And when you line it up, make sure the bottom is parallel to the bottom of the page. And then burnish it on. Oops. You don't need much glue to put this on. Okay, and then I'm going to go through, open them up, and burnish one more time on that score line. Okay, and then we'll go on to the next step. All right, from that last page, we have 3.5 inches when we cut the paper down to 8.5. So we're going to cut those down to 8.5. So basically I'm cutting 3.5 inches off. And then I'll grab my scoreboard. And we're going to put the short side at the top and score at 3. I'll go ahead and miter up to that score line, or from the score line to the top. And fold and burnish on our score line. Alright, so now grabbing my book, these are going to go on the front page closest to the right hand side of the book. So we'll do one at a time. I'll add my glue. And this will go with this flap is going to go to the edge of the page, not the hinge side, the right hand side of the page. So line it up to the edge of the page and burnish and burnish. So there's one, and then the other one we're going to do, now it's the left hand side of the page, but it's still on page 1. This is on the back of page 1. So again, I'm going to line it up with the side of the page and the bottom. Make sure it's straight and burnish. Okay. All right, and that's it for that step. All right, you're going to take 2 of the 3 by 12 pieces, and we're going to cut it down to 9.5 by 12. So I will just cut it 2.5 inches off. And we're going to use our scoreboards. We're going to make long pockets with these. So I'm going to put the short side at the top, so the 3-inch side is at the top of my scoreboard. And I'm going to score 1/2 inch away. I'm scoring at 2.5. Then I'll rotate and I'll score at 1/2 inch and at 9. Do the same with the other one. And then to miter, since we're making a pocket, you've got the 2 score lines. We're going to cut across the X created by those score lines. And then miter the corners on the other 2 scores. So go across the X. I save all my little scraps, those teeny corner ones, I throw in a pile for my campfire. Since we're camping, I will just save them up and use them to start a fire for cooking dinner or s'mores or whatever. Or the campground we're at has recycling for paper, so I might add it into the recycling. Okay, so here is signature 1. Here is signature 2. We're going to put one of these on that flap we put on the second signature. So what I'm going to do is add glue and line it up with the edge of that page and make sure it's parallel to the bottom. I'm going to just put that on. I'm not going to put the tabs on yet. I'm going to skip to the 4th signature, and I'm going to do the same thing with the flap on the 4th signature page. So here's the 4th grouping. Here's the flap we put on. I'm going to push that down and put this on the left side of the flap. Line it up with the very edge. Make sure it's lined up at the bottom and burnish. I am reaching for, I have some double-sided tape. I'm going to grab some tape, and maybe it's about 7.5 inches. And I'm going to put that right across where that tab is. And the reason I do that is if you're putting paper in when this pocket's there, if you don't put paper all the way down, which we may not, I haven't cut the paper yet, so I don't know. The whatever insert you put in there will still go in to there. So now I will go ahead and glue the other tabs down and adhere the rest of the pocket. And I'll do the same thing with that first pocket we made. And that will be how we finish this. All right, in your scrap pile you will have 5 pieces that are 3 inches by 9. What we're going to do with these is put them inside the top opening in between each of our pockets. Eventually we'll cut these down, we'll round the corners, or we'll cut the edges to look like a tag, but just to get them out of our scrap pile so we don't reach for them in error, we'll just put them in the pockets. Alright, so there we go with that. Now in your scrap pile you will have several pieces that are 3 by 12. Grab 2 of those and we're going to cut them down to 5.5 by 3. So 5.5 by 3. Yes, my Fisker's cutter doesn't go past 5.5, but I made a mark so I know where 5.5 is. Probably going to end up throwing these out, but I'll save them for now. And with our scoreboard, we're going to make pockets out of these. So you're going to score on 2 short sides and 1 long side. So I will score at 1/2, at 5, rotate so the short side's at the top, and score at 1/2. See how cumbersome it is for me to score that way? So 1/2, 5, and I'm going to score this way, 2.5, much easier. All right, and then we will cut on the score line. So we'll go to the X and then cut at the top. I always start at the bottom part first. And we'll just cut all 4 of these and then put them in. And incidentally, if for some reason you don't put things on the exact same page that I do, it's not a big deal. You can change how you decorate it. Just go with it. I mean, it would be perfect if it went exactly the same and then you know where all the paper goes, but if not, have some fun with it. That goes in my campfire pile. And then I'll fold and burnish on the score lines. All right. So here's the first page. Here's the second signature. I'm going to put this, on the back of the flap, of the original flap on the second page. And I'm going to do what I did before. We're going to just adhere the bottom, and then I'll put tape on. So on the back of this page. These small pockets will also go on the back of third page, the back of the fourth page, and on the front of page 5. All right, we're taking another 3 by 12 piece, and we're going to cut it at 5 3/4. 5 3/4 by 3. And while we're at it, I want this cut to 6. This is definitely going to go in the trash. I say that and then I hesitate. Nope, that one will go in the trash. Okay, I'm just going to put this aside for later. The 5 3/4 by 3, we're going to score 1 on the long side, 1 on the short side. So I'm going to score at 2.5, rotate and score at half. And let's cut. That magnet ended on my scissors. Miter on our score lines. And fold and burnish. And this is going to go on the very first page. It's going to go on this flap. Now, if you'd like, you can put this flap underneath so it'll go on this side. In fact, I think that's what I'll do. That way, we don't have to worry about things getting stuck on it. Put it underneath, and then I'll open this up and make sure it's all the way to the edge of the page, which it is. I'll burnish, and then I will adhere this to the front of the page. Okay, and that is all we're going to do for that. I have a 2 by 8.5 inch piece. I'm going to cut that to 5.5 and score it with the 5.5 inch side at the top. Score it at 1 and score it at 5. This is going to be a belly band. So I'm just going to miter. And I'm going to put this on the front flap, the flap on page 2. Just center it. Okay, and then I had told you to cut that piece 6 inches by 3. I'm changing the measurement, and it actually needs to be cut 5 1/8. Wait, 6 inches by 3. Yeah, 5 1/8 by 3. And we're going to score a 1/2 inch with the 5 1/8 at the top, score it 1/2 inch, rotate, so the 3-inch side is at the top, score at 1/2 inch, and rotate one more time, the 5 1/8 is at the top again, and score at 1/2 inch. Cut across our score lines, miter the corners. We'll fold and burnish. I'm not going to add this in yet. So now we have 4 1/8. I want you to cut, there should be a 2-inch piece of paper. Cut that 4 1/8. So I'm going to pull this flap out. And I'm going to glue this. First I'll cut it. I meant to do that before. So I'm going to cut down about 1/2 inch down on the score line, and then miter up to that cut. Just like that. So I've got my tabs folded in. I'm going to add glue to the tabs. And that 4 1/8 piece, 4 1/8 inch piece is going to go up to the score line. It's going to be open here on the bottom. So I want you to just grab a bead of glue and burnish that down. And then let's go to the back of the book. So on the page 5, on the flap, we're going to put that centered on that flap. Or you could put it towards the top or the bottom, whatever you want to do. So that will go like that. Now we can round the corners if you want, but that will be that little piece. Okay. Okay, I have a piece of my scrap pile, 3 1/2 by 12. I'm going to cut this down to 5 1/2, 2 5 1/2 inch pieces. And then grab my scoreboard. One, I'm going to score 1/2 inch on both sides. So I'll score at 1/2 inch and at 5. I'll do the same with the next one, 1/2 inch and 5, but then I'll rotate once and score at 1/2 inch. So this looks like a pocket. All right, let's, with the piece that has the 3 score lines, cut across those score lines. Okay, well, let's fold and burnish that one. And this other piece, so we're going to cut up 1 inch. I'm going to use my mat to mark where 1 inch is. I'm going to cut on the score line, up 1 inch on the score line, and then over. Cut up on the score line, over. I'll miter the top corner. And then I'll fold and burnish on the score lines. Okay. All right, there is a page. Page 3 does not have anything. Here's the flap. There's nothing on the front of page 3. So I'm going to put my pocket down at the bottom. Again, making sure this page will still close. Just the bottom flap is glued for now. I'll add a little piece of tape there just in case. And just in case I don't put paper that goes all the way down. Sometimes I will. And then I will take this piece that has the cut apart and put that inside and it looks like I have to trim a little. It's a little miter. So I mitered just a little piece from each side up to our little 1 inch mark, and this will go into our pocket, and then I'll glue them both together. Make sure that's straight. Grab my glue, hold on to it tight. And glue them both down. So now I have a double pocket. All right, that should take care of most of the big scraps. Now we're going to have to use other pieces of paper. All right, so with a new sheet of 12 by 12 paper, we're going to cut this down to 4.5. And then I'll cut that down to 8. These, of course, you can keep because now these will be great to use for your cut-aparts. All right, let me grab the scoreboard. All right, we're making a gusseted pocket for the back page. With the 8-inch side at the top, we're going to score it 1/2, 1, and 1.5. I'm going to score at 6.5. Whoops, no. Yeah, 7 and 7.5. Going to rotate and score just at 1/2. And we'll grab my scissors. Can miter up to the first score line if you want. It's not that necessary here. Now on the bottom, I'm going to miter. There's this long rectangle created from that score line up to the center, well, not center, but the ones closest to the center. So angle towards there. So just like that. And then I'm going to, with a almost straight cut on that bottom score line. Okay. Okay. So this score line, this flap will come up. That's easy. Actually, it's all easy. All right, so I'm going to take this first score line and fold up to the center of the page and burnish, fold down, and fold up. You can rotate and do the same. So fold up, fold down, and fold up. And then I'm going to put this flap at the top. I need to take a little bit off. And we're going to glue right here underneath just there. And make sure that's adhered. And then we're going to take this gusseted pocket, and this is going to go in the center. So when you put it in, make sure it's over to the edge of the cover. You don't want it too close to where the fold line is. And then in this case, I'm going to glue it all down. There's all this mess going on. If you want to glue a piece of paper inside, you can do that. But I'll make sure when I put this pocket and cover this page, I'll have a full piece of paper, so I don't have to worry about it getting hung up. All right, I'll add glue to all 3 tabs. Line it up at the bottom and at the side. And there's our gusseted pocket. And there we go. All right, after we cut that last piece for the pocket, we have a 7.5 inch by 12 piece. I'm going to cut that at 5. So it'll be 5 by 7.5. Going to, with the long side at the top, 7.5 side at the top, I'm going to score it 1/2 inch and 3/4. I'm going to have the flap have a little give to it. Since the pocket is gusseted, we can make the flap gusseted. I'm going to miter from that top score line and then fold and burnish on those score lines. And just because I like my flaps to have a rounded corner, I'm going to get my corner rounder, whoops, and round the bottom. I have Weir memory keepers and I'm using the 10mm, but it doesn't matter, just use whatever you have. Okay, this is going to go on the top of this page to cover that flap. And I like to have a pocket at the back of my books with the idea that you might have extra pictures or memorabilia, or whatever from whatever you're documenting in your book. I'll open that up. And this is a good spot to put everything left over. And I will make sure everything lines up. It's going to be lined up with the top of the page, lined up with the sides of the pocket, and there we go. Okay, there's the flap for the back page. All right, I have a piece that's 7 and 7.5. I'm going to cut at 3 7/8. So this is going to be 3 and 1/8. I'm going to cut it at 4 1/8. So that will be a to put one of the cut aparts, and then this we'll just put aside. So this piece, that is 7.5 by 3 7/8, we'll put at the scoreboard. Score at 1/2 inch with the short side at the top. Get around the corners of the side that doesn't have the score line. I'll miter. And fold and burnish. And on the front flap of the third signature, front flap of the third signature, this is going to go on the right hand side. Just to give us a different kind of flap. So I will adhere that. And there we go. All right, from a 12-inch piece, I am cutting a piece 4 1/2 by 5. I'm going to put on my scoreboard, and I'll score with the 4 1/2 side at the top 1/2 inch, rotate the 5-inch sides at the top, score 1/2 inch. Well, actually, I'm not going to cut that yet. What I'm going to do is measure up 2 inches on the side that doesn't have the score line. It's got the score on the bottom. Make a tick mark, and 2 inches over, and I'll cut from that line to that line. So it'll look like that. Then I'll miter. Cut across the score lines. Miter here. And then fold and burnish. And this will go on the front inside cover like that. I'm going to erase my little tick marks. Just so they don't show. And that will go on the bottom outside corner of that front page. Now one of our scraps is 2 inches by 4 3/8. We need it 2 inches by 3 1/4. I'm sorry, 4 1/4. 2 inches by 4 1/4. Garbage. Grab my scoreboard. And we're going to make a small pocket out of this. So with the long side at the top, I'll score it 1/2 inch, rotate. So the short side's at the top, score it 1/2 inch, rotate again, and score at 1/2 inch on the short side. So it's a small pocket miter. And burnish. We're not putting this on yet, but once we get paper cut for here, this is going to go on that pocket. I'm going to just put it in the pocket for now. All right, I have a 12 by 7 1/2 inch piece still. I'm going to take a 1 1/2 inch strip. So 1 1/2 by 12. I'm going to cut that down now to 9 1/2. We're going to make a real slim pocket. So I'll grab my scoreboard with that long side at the top. You're going to score it 1/2 inch and score at 9. Rotate and score at 1/2 inch. Now I'm going to put it over and score at 1 inch just because it's easier for me. So let's miter. And fold and burnish on those score lines. That's the thinnest pocket ever, isn't it? So in the book, here's page 1. Here's that flap on the back of page 1. I'm going to put it right here. And that is going to go on the paper, on the page, not on the hinge. Making sure it's even. And I guess I'll add tape. I don't know that I'll need to here. But it won't hurt. And then I'll glue these little flaps down. Oops. So what this is we can add something in that pocket to help keep the pocket closed, and now you won't need a magnet to keep this flap closed, is what I mean. So I just picked that up from my scraps and we'll go with that. I have a piece of my scraps that's 4 1/4 by 6 1/4. I don't think it came from this. I think I just had it in my scraps, but I'm cutting it down to 4, and it can stay 6. Throwing that out. And I am going to just, put it with the long side at the top and score at 1/2 inch. A miter. And fold and burnish. And I feel like this needs, give it a little rounded corner. And I am going to the front of page 4 and just centering this at the top. And I'll just center it at the top. And there we go. That is all. And that is all it is to construct the book. I'm going to do a real quick walkthrough and just point out the features again so you know what elements I put on which pages, but you can do your own thing. If you put a flap on the wrong page, it's not a big deal. So the inside front cover has this pocket. It's that angled pocket, and then there's a smaller pocket to put this cut apart in there. The front page, so here is, this is the actual signature. So it has a flap with rounded corners. I think that was 3 inches. And it's got a flap on this side as well. And the flap on the front has a small pocket. The signature for page 2, the base page has a large flap on the front, and then that flap has a side loading pocket. The bottom of the back of page 2 has a pocket. The signature for page 3, there is a small pocket, a small flap on the large flap for the front of page 3. For the actual page, we've got a stacked pocket, and the back of page 3 has one of the small pockets. Page 4 has a large flap, and on the front of the flap has a top-loading small flap and a side-loading pocket on the back of that flap. The front of the actual base page doesn't have any features, and the back doesn't actually have any features. The front of the flap on page 5 has this small pocket to put a journaling card. Now you have to make sure you cut it down so it fits inside this pocket. And of course I do have a magnet on there. Nothing on the inside of that large flap on page 5, but on the actual page 5 there is a small pocket. No features on the back of page 5. On the inside back cover, of course, we have the gusseted pocket with a flap. And that is it. Have fun. Share if you are on the Facebook group Scrapbookers of Country Craft Creations. Share your creations. I really would love to see if people use this tutorial and what they end up making. So that is what I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining me along in this tutorial. Have a fabulous day.